Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge and welcome to my January wrap up. If you're new here, the way that I do my wrap ups is I don't go through every book that I've read. I read way too many books to be able to make a wrap up where I talk about every book. But in this one, we'll talk about my stats, ratings, formats, subgenres, things like that. And then I'll talk about my top 5. And in this case, I do have a couple honorable mentions as well to talk about. But that's what we're going to be diving into today. If you would like to know about every book that I read this month, now's a good time to start watching my weekly wrap-ups if you don't already. I have a playlist of them right here. Every Saturday I sit down and I wrap up all the books that I read that week, and then that video goes up on Sunday. So if you want more in-depth about the bad books, the in-between books, and other books that were 5 stars, because as you'll see, I gave a lot of books 5 stars and I just can't gush about all of them in this video. I like to keep this one a bit more concise and quick to just wrap up my thoughts on the month. So without further ado, we are going to dive into that. All right, let's go. So I'm also very excited because I tried a new design of how to put my wrap up in my journal. In my bullet journal, and it's really great. My monthly wrap-ups is where I get to use a lot of the stickers that I buy from Brie at In Love and Words. Otherwise, like my other things I do in here, I don't always do that. So let's go ahead and dive in. This year, I'm not going to be breaking down the number of pages per day that I've read. I just decided to stop doing that. I don't really care about that stat anyway, but I will tell you how many pages I read as a whole. So in total, there was 50 books that I read. I'll talk about in a minute. There were 2 DNFs, but I count DNFs because I count the number of pages that I read for the DNF. So if I do 50 or 100 pages, I count them. And I also still want to track them. So anyway, there was 50 books that I got through this month, which was awesome. I felt like we were starting the year out really strong. And that was a total of 15,159 pages, which is absolutely awesome. I'm so proud of that. The format of these books was, I had 22 ebooks. Of course, that covers all Kindle Unlimited and ones that I've bought, and also fan fictions. Those all count as ebooks. 9 audiobooks. I had 5 ARCs, and then I had 17 physical books, which is awesome. The the ratings of these books were, I had 2 DNFs, like I said. I had 2 books that were 2 stars, which that was actually kind of crazy that had stuff that low. I had 3 books that were 3 stars, 5 books that were 3.5 stars, 19 that were 4, 6 that were 4.5, 10 that were 5, and 3 that were 6 stars. One of those 6 stars was a reread that I did for a patron, and the other 2 will definitely be what I talk about in my favorites. We'll get there in just a minute. The subgenre breakdown of this is, I read, honestly, the most different subgenres that I've ever read in a month, which was kind of cool. I really was pretty evenly split across a lot of things, except for, of course, contemporary. I read 20 contemporary books. That's always pretty strong. I read 9 fantasy books, 5 dark romance, 3 fan fiction. So fan fiction is now a new category that I'm adding into subgenres because I don't want to always loop it in with fantasy, because not all of fan fiction is going to be fantasy. So anyway, just want to pop in. I'm counting my fan fiction as its own subgenre, even though technically these 3 that I read were Harry Potter, so they were fantasy. But anyway, I have a lot of commentary about the new month. I've changed a few things in how I'm keeping track, right? I had 3 historical, 3 sci-fi, 3 paranormal, 2 erotic, 1 suspense, romantic suspense, and then 1 that was non-romance. And I will actually tell you, my non-romance that I read was Full Metal Alchemist, which I read at the beginning of the month, and I had a good time with that. I will continue that series. So there we go. That is the stats portion of this. And now let's get into my favorite part, your favorite part, the books that stood out in the month. First, I want to start with 2 honorable mentions and 1 series that was an honorable mention for me. So I recently just read Funny Feelings by Tara DeWitt, and this was a 5-star read for me. Loved it. It didn't quite make it into the top 5, as you'll see. I had some very passionate feelings about the books that were my 5 stars this month, but I just thought this was so heartwarming. It's about a comedian. Well, they're both comedians, but the heroine is currently a comedian, and the hero is her manager, and he's a single dad, and they're just best friends, and there's a fake dating scheme involved, and it's this slow burn into love, and I adored it. I understand why it was on so many people's favorites lists. And so I had to have an honorable mention for it because it was just so beautiful. Like, oh, it made me so happy. Then I haven't really got to gush about this one yet because I did technically finish this in January, but as I've shared many, many times, like I usually end my January like a couple days early so that I can get these videos ready to go up. I just like to have them go up the very first day of the month, which means I have to prep them a little bit early. But I read Under a Northern Sky as part of the KU readathon, and this is by L.L. Meyer, and this was for the prompt in the KU readathon that was bet on your TBR the longest, and this one has been in my library the longest. It's the book I had checked out the longest, and I remember hearing about this ages ago. It's a barbarian romance. I'm not going to go into it too much here because this is just our honorable mentions, but it had this interesting mix of like, it reminded me of parts of old school romances I love, but it also isn't like quite a regular historical situation. It also wasn't a fantasy because like their speak is partially modern, which I know can bother some people, but this book was kind of in a bubble of just being like out of time because they're not completely like Vikings, but they're also like barbarians is kind of like this generalized term, but it's not quite the level of like barbarian fantasy in A Heart of Blood and Ashes. So it's so hard to categorize. I ended up putting it as a historical because that's what it fits best, but I definitely look forward to reading more by this author. This is a first in a series, but this was a standalone romance, which I remember being one of the main reasons I was happy to get it because it is going to be a trilogy, but it's going to be about different warlords within the world. So again, the way Heart and Blood and Ashes is doing type of thing. So I gave that one 5 stars. I liked it. And then the other honorable mention I want to do is that I ended up blowing through the rest of Clifton Forge. I randomly got it in a bee in my bonnet. There has been, over the past couple months, a lot of read-alongs doing doing Devney Perry books. And my friend Jesson has read a few of hers. And I asked her, I said, which is your favorite Devney Perry series? Because I know she dabbled in a few. And I had read Steel King, aka used to be called The Gypsy King, but that has been changed for good reason. But I asked her which her favorites, and she said Clifton Forge really was my favorite. And I was like, you know what? I had 2 of the audios saved. I had books 2 and 3 because when there was an audio sale last, I was like, I'm going to snatch these up. So I just started them. I have been working on a lot of projects lately. If you are a patron, you'll know I've been working on a lot of different sewing projects, and I share those with my patrons that I'm doing. It's not really something I will put on the channel here. People have asked, but like that is a Patreon special thing to show my crafts and stuff that I do. Although I have been trying to share some things in YouTube stories now and then. That is something that YouTube is utilizing as a little bit of like, it's a little bit of competition to TikTok or to Instagram. So if you're someone who says like, I never get Instagram, if you're watching me here, it means you have access to my story, which usually if there's a new story live, there'll be a red circle around my face on my profile, and then you can see what I'm sharing in there. So anyway, thought I would plug that. People have been looking at those lately, and I try to cross-share some stuff that I share on Instagram onto YouTube stories just to keep YouTube friends apprised of things, right? But anyway, my point with that long rabbit trail that I just went down is that these crafts that I'm doing is the perfect time for me to listen to audios. I've lately have struggled with audios in recent months, and that has bothered me greatly because I adore audiobooks, but my brain has just been so busy that I haven't been able to put on audiobooks and focus on them the way that I used to. And so what I have done is I've taken up some different crafts. So there's a quilt that I worked on in November and December. That's when I binged through the Fae Guardian series, as well as rereading a Cherise Sinclair series that I love. And this month it was Clifton Forge. So I gave a couple of these 5 stars. Some of them were 4, 4.5. I overall enjoyed this series quite a bit. This is about an MC that has been disbanded, but they still have enemies from when they were a real club, or when they were together. So I did really enjoy these. They were less steamier than I expected. That's something that I have just had to change my brain to know that Devney Perry isn't a high steam author. I'd assume she was. That was my bad. I didn't have a problem with these books for that. Like, the romances were still very beautiful and I had a good time. So, honorable mentions. Okay, now let's get into the books that were my top 5. First up, we have a book that actually just released, but I was lucky enough to be granted an ARC of this book, and that is The Duke Gets Even. I am kind of sad that this one got a shiny cover. Not fun. Don't love that. But this is the 4th and last book in the 5th Avenue Rebel series. So I never read book 1 because a lot of my friends didn't like that book. So I just went ahead and skipped it. And I read books 2 and 3 last year and I enjoyed them. So I asked for the ARC of this one. And this was one of the first books that I read this year. It was like the first or second book that I read in the year. And it was a 6-star book. This was a 6-star book for me. It just was perfect, okay? It was perfect. There are some feminist themes in this that could be bothersome to some people. I will just put it out there because, shoot, that is something that bothers people now and then about certain historical romance authors. It's something that I've struggled with in the last few years because, in my personal opinion, it is, for the large part, mostly women who are reading historical romance, and I don't feel the need to be preached to by a historical romance about issues about women. I'm like, I don't need you to be preaching to me about it. I know the issues that have faced me as a woman. I know them. Anyway, that's my personal feel. That works well for a lot of people, and I would never tell people that it's wrong. But for me, sometimes, when that feminist, I don't like saying agenda, but when that feminist storyline invades a beautiful romance, that is when I get pissy about it. And there were a lot of books in the past few years that do that. Now, again, there are some themes in this. There are some causes that Nellie has taken up. But to me, they don't affect this romance because the things keeping these two apart are not her feminist agenda, okay? Like, they're not. There are bigger issues that these two are facing. And so the times when she is supporting her cause and helping women, and she's doing it in a very, like, under the table way, it comes up later because things happen about that, but it didn't bother me. And in fact, the things that she was doing, I look at myself and I was like, I would absolutely do those things if I was in this time. So I know for some, you still won't like that plot. That's totally fine. And I feel like I'm making excuses for it already. It really isn't that big of a deal, but I know that for some people it was kind of just like, why'd that need to be in there? And I'm like, fair. That is a fair point. But it could not overshadow in any way Andrew Lockwood in this book, okay? Andrew Lockwood is on my new book boyfriends list. I'm a little tickled pink because on the Amazon page, my quote about Andrew Lockwood made it onto the selling page for this book, and I squealed because I was like, yay! I love Andrew so much. This is the Duke who has been having a tough time finding a bride. He needs an heiress. He is from the British aristocracy, and he's in America trying to find an American heiress because he needs one. His family needs it. His land needs it. His people need it. And we've seen him run afoul and not be able to seal the deal with a couple of the previous heroines actually have been, people for him to court, and it hasn't worked. And this book actually starts with, they have this like secret rendezvous where neither of them like fully knows who the other person is, but he's actually at a certain house party to court a lady, and he meets Nellie out by the sea. I think they're by the sea or a pot, like I can't remember where they are, but by the water, and they have this amazing connection. And then she finds out that he's there to court someone else. Now, in his mind, he's like, I have not started courting any of these people, and I ran into this beautiful redhead out by the lake. So it's like, to him, there shouldn't be any cross purposes. But then he finds out she's the friend of some of the women that he's been courting. So this actually starts kind of like back a little bit, maybe. I think it starts like after the first book. But again, I hadn't read the first book, so I don't know the timeline with that one. But we see them at different points through the other two books. Like, we see different things. But anyway, fast forward along. Like, these two, their chemistry, their connection is so strong. And they end up starting a secret affair with each other. But the Duke of Lockwood knows that he has to marry. And not only is Nellie probably not the right one for that, even though she's an heiress, she definitely is a bit of a pariah. Like, her family's money keeps her in good graces, but it's really like the names of her friends that kind of keep her relevant and such like that. And yeah, and then we have Andrew, who he really is getting very tired of trying to find a bride, but he knows that his family needs it, so he's still trying to do that. But the more time he spends around Nellie, the more that he just wants to say, fuck it, and have her. And what I loved about this, like why this became a 6-star for me, was I loved Nellie. I really did. I love so much about her. I love her family, both her father and her mother's family, who are Irish gangstas, okay? Her family are Irish gangstas, and I just love that so much. And Joanna Shupe, please, please write me a full series about the Irish gangsters in New York, okay? Like, I want it. I need it. Give it to me. We know that Joanna Shupe knows how to write gangsters. If you don't know, it's officially out. It's officially out that Mila Finelli is Joanna Shupe. So she knows how to write mafia, okay? She could write me some Irish gangsters. I'm just saying. Anyway, moving along. And Lockwood, as he gets pulled deeper in with Nellie, he really does decide, he's like, I want her. And having anyone else will just make me feel like a liar for my whole life, because she's who I want. And then once he decides that he wants her, he does that thing that the romance heroes that have my heart do, is he's like, I will remove every obstacle. I will make this happen. But the thing is, Nellie doesn't have to marry him. She doesn't need him. And she is scared of ruining him. And even when they discover that their sexual preferences definitely align, which she threw in some kinky kink in this one, okay? It's nothing too bold because it still is written a little bit safer, but the Duke of Lockwood has some dark desires inside of him, right? And they were hot. But I loved when he became obsessed with her. He would, like, got approval from her family members, but there's a scene actually with her dad that just really won me over, and I won't spoil it, but I love that Joanna Shupe, like, sometimes she writes bad parents, but like on purpose bad parents, and sometimes she writes just the best parents. And like Nellie's dad, he was lovely. He was lovely. So I talked about this enough. There's a vlog where I'm reading this for the first time, and I just adored it. But this was a 6-star book for me. It was. I really enjoyed the previous 2 books, but this one was my favorite. I loved Nellie so much. And again, for me, the issues that she is challenging in her time are issues that I would challenge too. And so for me, the agenda in this one wasn't one that had me rolling my eyes. It had me being like, oh, that was the worst, and I would want to make a difference too. So that's a personal choice. It won't be for everyone, but it's also not a huge part of the story. Like, it's not a ginormous part of it or anything. So yeah, that one was 3.5 on my spice scale. I already said it's a 6-star. It was a 3 on my swoon scale. I don't have an official swoon scale yet, but some of the stickers that Brie has are actually these hearts, and you can fill in your swoon level. And so I do that for my favorites of the month. I won't be doing that for every book I do, but that one was a 3 on my swoon level. Yeah, okay, moving on to the next one. We will talk about another book that was read during that vlog. And this one because when I did this little like reading at the beginning of the year thing for me, I tried to pick books in different categories. So I did one manga, which that's what Full Metal Alchemist was for. I did one historical that I wanted to read, and The Duke It's Even was picked. And I put out a vote, and I knew which one was going to win. So it was kind of like I knew it was going to happen. I had people vote on an author that I would give a second chance to. And unanimously, people picked Rena Kent and specifically God of Malice. Now, I have spoken at length. I've put Rena Kent in many a video where I've said I wouldn't read any more of her books because I've read 8. I read 8 of them. And I loved 2 or 3, but then progressively I wasn't loving what I was reading. Like all the ones I didn't like came on the back end, and I was just fed up with what I was getting, and I was like, I can't anymore. I'm done. I'm done with this. However, in the past few months, I've seen the Legacy of the Gods books showing up on everyone's favorites list, specifically people that I really trust, and specifically people who enjoy dark romance. And this book with Killian and Glendon just kept popping up. And the positive side is because I've read 8 books of Rena Kent's before, I actually did know most of the parents who are parents of these kids going to these elite universities. And I even like wrote a little bit on this right here. There is a tree, which is great. I flip to that tree all the fucking time because I forget what some stuff is. But this was a psychopath romance. And this one I talk quite a bit about in that vlog. Killian is a psychopath. He knows he's a psychopath. He doesn't really engage with emotions. And I loved this because this is another case of a book that, like, this isn't fully a bully romance. This is like a twisted mindfuck is what this is. But also, this hero was so, like, real to me at the same time. How do I say this? Like, how do I break it down? Like, this hero doesn't have trauma that made him this way, right? And I'm gonna make the comparison because everybody will. Like, one of the reasons I really didn't want to read this one is people were comparing it to Untouchable, and people compare books to Untouchable all the time, and they're rarely right, in my opinion, because there are so many things to me that make Untouchable superior. We're not talking about that right now, Jennifer. Stay on track. However, what I loved about this one when I was reading it is that it has a lot of the, like, you are in my sights and you are my sole attention. Like, I'm giving you all my attention, which is something I do love about Untouchable quite a bit, is that, like, you're my new toy and I want to know everything about you and how you tick, and I want to take you apart and put you back together. And this hero, he's going to school to become a doctor because he wants a legal reason to cut people up, okay? Talk about a psychopath who knows where his lane is, all right? But also, he was born this way. He is from a wonderful family. By wonderful, I mean he doesn't have trauma from them, okay? Like, the generation of his parents, obviously, is another book by Rena Kent, and they're not sunshine and roses. They're pretty fucked up people, but they're very good to their kids. Like, they've treated their children well. So he doesn't have trauma from being, like, beat up as a kid or anything like that. But he's a psychopath, and he's very good at masking and mirroring it. But Glendon, she gets in his sights one night. She has kind of a traumatic situation where a boy that she was kind of falling for, he killed himself, and he'd been encouraging her to unalive herself with him. And she didn't, but she's thought about it. And she is also from a good family, but she has mental health struggles. And something that this series is dealing with quite a lot, and I have read the second book at this point, is mental health and mental struggles, and whether you have a wonderful family or not, that doesn't exempt you from having mental health struggles. But anyway, what I loved about Killian is that he has masked this, but he's found ways to let it out. And when Glendon gets in his sights, he wants her, and he wants to fuck with her and fuck her and all of these things. But again, like, he becomes so obsessive and possessive, and he has this form of caretaking that's like nothing I've ever experienced, because he doesn't want his toy to be sick or weak or not cared for. So he very much takes care of those things for her. So this was just so interesting to me, and the way that it's setting up the Legacy of the Gods series, I absolutely see why this was on so many people's favorites list. And I was just really wowed by it. I ended up annotating this book, and I didn't even mean to, because I thought it was fascinating. And of course, it does have some dirty, dirty, sexy times in this. This has lots of kinks in it, mostly revolving around bondage. There is some blood play, and there is some breath play, and there is definitely non-con. Their first interaction is non-consensual, although the non-consent isn't as black and white as it seems, even, that we find out later, which was very cool. Like, I'm not gonna lie. There are so many layers to this book. So yeah, I don't want to be the one who says, if you like Untouchable, read this. I would more say to, like, if you like Descent, try this. Or if you like those types. Because I'll say it and I'll say it again, Carter Mahoney, he has childhood trauma, and he's become this way as a coping mechanism. He has. I will fight anyone to the death over that. He wasn't naturally born this way. He came that way because of abuse that he suffered and neglect from his family, and then his own coping mechanisms. But this guy, he's born this way. And there are people born as psychopaths who don't end up as murderers. There are. There are people who, I heard a psychologist, whichever one, explaining it as that there can be psychopaths, even ones who are serial killers, that they have perfectly normal lives with their families, and they do have emotion for their families. Like, because they care about their family, they care about their wants and needs. But anyone outside of their circle, if it's not someone they care about, they have nothing. And they just don't care. And I think that's so interesting. And I think that Killian is definitely one of those. And I really love the peeks at his family that we get, where we see that they are these stable, wonderful people, and that they don't want their son to be like this, but they're also kind of waiting for him to snap one day. I'm talking way too long about some of these. That's not what we're going to do for all of them. But those two were my two wait, that's a lie. That one was 5 stars. Sorry. The Duke Gets Even was 6. That was 5. Those are my first, 2 books that I read this year, and it was a banger of a way to start it off, okay? Now we're going to go a little bit quicker about the next 3, because I don't have as much to say about those, I think. That one, like I said, was 5 stars. It was a 4.5 on my spice scale, so way up there. There is lots of fucking, it's yummy stuff. And that one's like a 1.5 to a 2 on the swoon scale. He gets to some swoony places, but definitely doesn't start that way. He starts in the negative swoon zone, and we move along. All right, then I read Desire in His Blood by Zoe Draven, and this one I will speak quickly about because this was an exclusive read for my patrons, so I have a full review of that that's up and available to my $7 patrons and above, so I'm not really going to spill too many beans about that here, just because there's people who paid for that review, so I have to say it. But I'll tell you the basics, because I'm also not going to be a complete tease of it. But this is an alien arranged marriage. Our kind of alien, he is a, berserker vampire. He has wings. He's a bloodsucker. And our heroine needs to marry him to kind of save her family. He offers a lot of money to have a human bride, but it turns out he paid a lot of money to specifically have her, because he has revenge on his mind. He wants revenge against her family, and she's the perfect one to use for that. So she comes to his home and becomes his wife, and he is planning to use and abuse her, right? Like, this hero has plans to be a bad boy to her, but oopsie, she's actually his fated mate. And the minute that he smells her blood, he knows he's fucked, because he cannot carry out his retribution fully against a woman who is meant to be his. So things are going to get a little sticky real fast. So I gave this one 5 stars. It had Beauty and the Beast vibes, and it had some beautiful, enemies to lovers. Like, they really are enemies. And the way he treats her in the beginning, you know, she wants to be hopeful and believe for something good, but he just doesn't make that easy in the beginning at all. I'm very excited to read more in this series. Zoe Draven is so talented. She just really works for me. Her alien romance just really worked for me. So yeah, this one was 5 stars. It was a 2 on the swoon scale because, again, the hero, it took him a while to work for it. And this was a 3.5 on my spice scale. There was blood play. There was bondage situations. There was edging. So much edging happens in this. So much. All right, next I have a fan fiction that made it in my top, and this was The Radiant by Fury Shashka. This one was recommended. I can't remember if it was put in the form or if I just snagged it from someone, but this one was a Ginny Weasley and Lucius Malfoy pairing, and I've only read one of those, and I think someone wrecked it because, like, I asked for more. I was like, I want to read more with Ginny in it, and this one was recommended to me, and this was great because this is actually like an ex's dad romance, which is so great because in the beginning of this book, Ginny is actually seeing Draco because they currently are kind of like working together and they become like fuck buddies, and she is pretty into Draco. She gets invited to his house a couple of times and sees Lucius, and there's this like tension between them, and there's actually a scene where Lucius has been pretty rude and Ginny like storms out of the room and Draco goes after her, and they end up fucking in the library on Lucius's desk as kind of a fuck you. And Lucius comes in and sees this just as she reaches orgasm, and he doesn't walk away. He doesn't walk away because he's like, all right, so this is the fuck you that you're giving me. I might as well see it happening. So very interesting. But then not long after this, Draco breaks up with her, and she's actually pretty sad. And she's also conflicted because she's like, did he see that I was kind of having feelings for his dad? I don't know. But Draco is not completely unlikable in this book, but he does do some stupid things because, like, he's the one who broke up with her, and he kept some of her books, some of her very special books that he just kept and left them at home. And so she goes to see Lucius and she's like, I need these books back. And he's like, I will find them, but you're here. And they end up fucking in his library again. That's the place to do it. And he's like, I'll get you your books. And so he sends her home, and then he doesn't talk to her for a little while, and she is spiraling because she feels like such a horrible person, and she can't believe that she liked this and that she fucked Lucius and how hot it was. And then he finally gets her books back and she lets him have it, and she's like, you left me spiraling, you fucked me and dropped me, what the hell is going on? And he's like, I thought you might have been ashamed of it, and you know, this could never work. And of course it could never work, but that doesn't stop us from having a secret relationship. And these two, there's a lot of sex in this, okay? This is a 5 on the spice scale. There's a lot. There's kinky stuff. There's even some switching that happens at one point. Lucius gets dominated by her at one point, and I like that. Like, mostly he's the dominant, but there's a scene where, because so many times in this book, we see him help her get out of her head, and there's a day where he needs to get out of his head, and Ginny helps him by tying him down and spanking him and letting him go to subspace, and it was perfection, okay? It was so good. And the emotions in it, it's not just because it's hot to see Daddy Lucius getting spanked. Like, it's hot because of the trust that was involved in that, and that they are fully at this place in their relationship where either of them can come to the other with issues like that, and I love it. And then what, like, really pushed this over the edge for me is that Ginny risks so much to be with Lucius. Like, Lucius really only had, like, he still chats with Narcissa now and then. This is one of, like, where they're a divorced couple. Like, she doesn't hate him, he doesn't hate her, but, and then he has Draco, and that's really all that Lucius has in his life. Whereas Ginny has her entire family, her friends, none of them will approve of her being with Lucius. And the fallout of telling her family, like, broke my heart. It absolutely broke my heart, the way that most of the Weasleys react. Hermione and then like Harry are actually our like in-betweens in this one, and it was just really beautiful. And when we get some resolution to that part of it, when we get some forgiveness happening, I cried my eyes out when some of her brothers show up for an important moment, and I sobbed. So I also decided, and I want to pitch this here, I want to read fan fiction that's about every Weasley sibling. I have read a Percy one. I've read a little quick one about Percy. I've read one with Bill. But I would like to read ones with everyone. I want to read a Fred, a George, a Ron. Yes, I want to read something with Ron. It could be a gay romance. I would read that. And I want to read something with Charlie. I have one with Charlie on my Kindle right now. But if you have read any fanfics with any of the other Weasleys, please recommend them to me here or put it in my book rec form, which is always open and is in the description below. All right. I think I said, yeah, that one was 5 stars. That one was a 3 on the swoon scale because Lucius, my precious. And then that was a 5 on the spice scale. There's a lot of smut in that one. And it's good. It's good. It's good stuff. Now, the last book that is a favorite and it was a 6 star is the fact that I got to read Powerless by Elsie Silver. And I know I can't talk about this much because most of y'all haven't read this one yet. If you watch my week 4 weekly wrap up, which I will either have linked or else it's just a couple videos ago, I talk more in depth about this and I have a little spoiler section where I'm talking about some things of it. But I was lucky enough to get an arc of this. And I, of course, was so excited. Like, I had full faith in Elsie Silver after I've read 4 of her books now. I've read 2 books in the Gold Rush Ranch, and I've, of course, read Flawless and Heartless, and I haven't stopped talking about those books. Okay? So I had high hopes for this, and I was fully willing to trust, even though Friends to Lovers is the trope that can be the most easily messed up for me, because the reasons why they've been friends for so long, and these two practically family, like Jasper is raised with her cousins. There definitely are some jokes made by Harvey. Harvey is the patriarch of the Edens, and he does not miss a chance to make an inappropriate joke, and so he definitely makes kissing cousins and says they're going to have children with tails, which I was like, really, Harvey? Really do need to go with that? But we do. It's a thing. They're not related at all because Jasper was adopted by the Edens. So anyway, I can't go into too much detail about this. I will go in more detail about it once the book is out. It comes out on February 10th. I'm actually going to be on vacation when it comes out, but I will look forward to when I can gush about it and talk about it. I'm sure I'm going to recommend it in many videos going forward, so it will be there. But the things that really worked the most for me about this were that the reasons why they weren't together yet, though frustrating, did have, like, a reason. And, like, Jasper has a bit of coming back to do because this is a runaway bride scenario. Like, Sloane, who doesn't love a heroine named Sloane, okay? I literally could make an oddly specific video just about heroines named Sloane. Okay, there's so many of them, and they're all awesome. She is literally about to marry someone else, and Jasper doesn't do anything about it. Like, it isn't Jasper who stops this wedding. It's something else. Someone else does. But it's a runaway bride scenario. And then these two kind of end up on a road trip together to do an errand for the ranch. And a lot of what they've been suppressing comes out. And Jasper, he has anxiety and he has some issues from his past that, you know, have kept him from Sloane. Again, also some other reasons. Also, he has control issues, which lead him to some very kinky desires, okay? This one had some edging and orgasm control and breath play. Like, Jasper is a throat grabber, okay? He's a throat grabber, and I love that so much. So yeah, my heart was so completely stolen by these two. Heartless still edges this out for me But I'm very happy that this is in a new year, and so I can put it at the top of my list that this was a 6-star book. It was a 4 on the Spice scale. It's a 4 on my Swoon scale, and I cannot wait for this to get into everyone's hands. I think the audio will be released day of or very soon, and it's going to have Teddy Hamilton, so I'm going to be re-listening. I'm going to be listening to this. I'm so excited for it. So, yeah. So there you go. This was going to be one of my shorter videos, and then I couldn't stop the gushing about my books. No one's surprised. No one's surprised. Well, thank you so much for watching. If you made it to the end, give me some gold stars. Give me some gold stars for a great January. And yeah, thank you so much for watching this. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up and subscribe. I have lots of recommendation videos and those weekly wrap-ups that I do that we can look forward to. So thank you so much for watching, friends, and I'll see you next time. Bye.